What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 305 of Opinions May Vary. I almost muffed it. I worked through it, though. We're getting through there. I am your host, JR. My co-host with me, Alex.
Hello.
Joining us this week is an enormous barbarian from Cimmeria. Cimmeria. Fuck. I'm off to a bad start. 20 seconds in. Cimmeria. He has big muscles and swords.
Mm-hmm.
He also, sometimes he's a buccaneer. He's also a
Marauder. Yeah.
He's also.
Let's see. Here.
What else? What else has he got? He's also been a savage.
Yep.
He's been a guardian, a hunter. He's been valorous. I didn't know that was a word.
Yeah. Well, looking at those books, they came up with a lot of words.
Yeah.
There's a lot of titles.
That's the best part about fantasy. You can literally do whatever you want.
Yeah, pretty much.
So,
well, I'm gonna get into some of that later.
Yeah, we're gonna dive headfirst into this muscled, rippled man named Conan. It's I almost wanted to drop the typical, longtime listeners, but honestly, we haven't talked about it too much. In that, you are a big fan of Conan.
Huge fan of Conan.
Huge fan of Conan. Big fan does not do service. It's huge. Enormous fan of Conan. And it's like obviously Colin, or I almost called you Colin. Alex likes Conan, but like if you look around, I wouldn't expect such a big fan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a lot of it's been put away for the past couple of years.
Yeah,
because it was more of a high school / recently after high school kind of thing. I was one of those kids who, instead of having friends, I read a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I was doing, and I was reading mostly Conan, and that was also a lot of my inspiration for at the time when I was working out a lot. And I was like, I have to be big and strong, just like Conan.
Yeah, you got to be like a barbarian.
I'm gonna grow my hair long, just like Conan.
So this week, we're gonna talk about Conan. We're gonna talk about the barbarian, who I've already learned in the hour that I've been here beforehand. I thought Conan was like from like the 70s. And I did a little bit of learning.
Yeah.
Turns out he's been around a little bit longer than that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to start.
Like, the prime topic is because Marvel got the rights back to publish new Conan comics.
Yes.
Which is like, because if you listen to us a lot, we pay attention to a lot of artists. If you also follow artists on Instagram or whatever, there's been a lot of Conan sketches popping up. I believe Jared shared to me Jason Latour had posted a picture of some of his Conan books, some of his novels that he had from back in the day, which were the Ace collection, and I was like, respect, the Ace are the good ones.
Sometimes in our conversations, they can either be in depth, or it'll be like, hey man, check this out. Oh, that's neat. And then we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah.
But like this one was, oh God, what did I do? Like I put like my phone down, and I was like, that's the end of that conversation. I was wrong.
5 paragraphs later.
I should have known better. But yeah, there's been a lot of Conan talk, which I imagine makes you happy. Like, is it one of those things like, oh God, they better not screw this up?
I don't know. I'm kind of in between right now, because as far as Conan in comics was concerned, like, Marvel started it back in 1970, and they had I believe it's a 275 issue run,
which is a lot.
Especially for a character who's like not Marvel property.
Yeah, it's not like Spider-Man.
Like Fantastic Four went for 600 and some issues before they would reboot it or whatever, stuff like that. And then they kind of he became unpopular, so they just stopped printing him. Right? It's like, how many more stories can you tell with this strong dude with a sword? And he just wasn't sexy for a while. Mm-hmm. And then Dark Horse got the rights to it, and with the wave of artists that were coming through, Dark Horse got Carrie Nord to start drawing, and was able to do some new interesting stories and make it cool again. And Dark Horse has done pretty well. They've done a lot of really good books and good issues with that, but I don't know, something between what Marvel has and Disney backing them up. They've been buying up a lot of stuff. Because I think when John posted about it, and John like mentioned it to us, and because Dark Horse lost Star Wars a couple of years ago.
Yep.
It's like now they're getting Conan taken away from them. It's like, oh man, Dark Horse, are you gonna be okay?
Yeah.
What did you start with?
I wanted to start like in the beginning, like what are your Conan? Why Conan? What's the deal? How'd you get into this? And what's kept you onto it for so long?
In the way back 1980s, the TV station TBS and I think TNT, these two stations each had the rights to one of the Conan movies. So let's say
And Shawshank Redemption.
exactly something like that. Yeah. And it's like once in a while, like maybe once a season or so, they would show Conan, maybe twice a year or something like that.
The Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Yep.
So like TBS would show Conan the Barbarian, and then like TNT or someone would show Conan the Destroyer. And like you get eventually after a couple of years, you almost like set your watch by it because it was a regular kind of thing. It's like, oh, it's time for it to come around again. Is it 3:00 yet?
Conan's on.
And yeah, and you'd know, and I'd watch that. But at some point, the soundtrack got to me, and I got the soundtrack like as a gift for Christmas, and I don't know, that had a good effect on me. And then I was still trying to become my own person again. Or for the first whatever,
Right,
because you're a teenager. It's like, well, what am I going to be for the rest of my life?
Finding your identity and
Yeah.
so forth.
And then so I'd frequent bookstores, and at the time there was always a lot of Conan titles, and I was like, let me check this out. And so I would read one or two, and then I would read a couple more, and then it was more, and then I would just add on to that, and then the internet became a thing, because this is how old I am, because I existed before internet. But you had to get your stuff from bookstores or libraries.
Right.
And then that was a way for me to learn more and then buy shit off eBay like I still am doing. And it's where I realized, like, what can I get at a bookstore? And usually it was the Tor titles. And then Ace Publishing started reprinting some of their older stuff, which was the genuine Robert Howard stories. And even at the time, I could tell, like, well, I like the Robert Howard stuff better than I like some of the newer ones. Because they felt more genuine. And even then, like, they weren't always, like, pure Howard. Because some of those were just unfinished transcripts that Sprague de Camp would finish for him anyway. Or not for him, but, like, the publisher would be like, hey, someone complete this. And Sprague de Camp, like, had a familiarity with Robert Howard. And that's where those would come in. And I mean, I don't know how many books I've gotten to now, or at least at the point.
You have boxes.
It's probably at least 50, I'd guess.
Which is like,
it's probably all of them.
I'm pretty proud of my bookshelves, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's a lot of books, especially because like people look at me like, oh yeah, you're like you like Stephen King, because I have like 7 Stephen King books.
Well, how many has he done?
Stephen King?
Yeah.
He's done a lot.
Like 50?
Yeah, he's done a lot of books.
Okay.
But I've read most of the ones that, like, as far as like his classics, like It and The Stand and The Shining, and then most of his new stuff. Like, because once I got into him, I was like, I need to read his books as soon as they come out.
Right, yeah.
So I have a lot of his more recent stuff, but like compared to some people, I'm not as read. But I am, like, he is one of my favorite artists next to like Chuck Palahniuk, which again, like, people look at my bookshelf like, oh, you like Chuck Palahniuk? And even then, I mean, I have all of Chuck Palahniuk's books, but that's not anywhere near. Like, I could fit all of my Palahniuk books in like half of a box, whereas you have multiple boxes filled with Conan books, and like those are small paperbacks.
Yeah. But with research came, like a greater depth of knowledge. And at some point it got to be less about the character and more about how the character gets made. There was a point where I was like, maybe I want to be a writer. How hard can write?
Oh, it's simple, right?
Write not hard,
Yeah.
write easy.
It's as easy as art.
And so I was looking more into that, and I was like, what's this Robert E. Howard guy like? Let me look into that some more. And even then, like, that's kind of a difficult pool to wade into because he died so long ago.
Right.
He was born 1906, died 1936, lived 30 years.
Good Lord.
Yep.
I am 31.
Started writing Conan at 23.
I've done nothing
Pretty-
with my life.
Pretty much only wrote for about 7 years. Right?
What did he die of?
Suicide.
Oh.
Yep. There's a lot, like, it's a weird situation. His father was a doctor. His mother died of tuberculosis. Or his mother, like, went into a coma from tuberculosis. And there's a lot of guesswork and a lot of, like, estimations to make about his mental health and his relation to his mother.
Right.
Because he was always trying to take care of her because the father was out working and he would stay home. It's like, oh, he was mama's boy. It was kind of weird. It's like, yeah, it kind of was weird. And he was like an awkward kind of dude. Had a couple of friends, but like was still kind of a weirdo. And that's one of the things where he would enter into this fantasy world. But he still had a complete understanding and grasp of the difference of reality to fantasy.
Right.
By being a writer, it's not like he's like, creating this world to go live in. It's, I get paid by the word, so I'm going to put extra words in my stories. Because it was something like he would get 1/3 of a cent per word. So for every 3 words he wrote, he would get paid 1 cent.
Right.
Right. So he would find ways just to pad out some of the stories he'd be writing. Because also with that pay rate, he's not writing books. He's not writing novels. He's writing like chapters or like, I'm not sure what to call them.
Novellas, short stories.
Yeah. And they would get put into pulp magazines. So he was a pulp writer. And most of his stuff would go to magazines and publishers would either not hire him or like try and jip him on pay or like
Right.
he would have to know his word count to submit it and then know how much he's supposed to get paid. And that's why like the first collected novels, like the collected editions, are kind of rarities because those weren't made until the 50s when someone took all his pulp, fiction collections and put them into an actual book.
20 years after his death?
Yeah.
About?
Yeah. Yep. Just about. Because I keep an eye on those sometimes to look at like, well, what can I not spend my money on today?
Right.
And those are the Gnome Press Conan books. There's 7 of them. They're printed between 1950 and 1957. Yeah, like his family had a dog and like the dog died and he didn't want to deal with it. So his dad like buried the dog somewhere in the yard and he never mentioned it. And he was like, oh, I noticed the dirt's kind of chewed up over there behind the barn. And, like never mentions it again. But yeah, it was a weird thing where his mother dies and then he just suicides. To which he had like a small writing room. And I think they may have like transplanted him once or twice because he was from Texas, Cross Plains, Texas. Cross Plains has like kind of a celebration each year for like the Robert E. Howard Day. And there's a Robert E. Howard Foundation and everything to control like the license and title and where it goes and who buys it next and whatever. But like his typewriter's still there. And I believe they left his last paper in there too, which like he knew he was going to do it. So like his suicide note essentially says, all fled, all done. So lift me on the pyre. The feast is over. The lamps expire.
And that's still in his typewriter?
Yeah. Yep.
Oof.
Yep. But when I say like, oh, he's kind of a weirdo, his friends called him Two Gun Bob.
Okay. On the count of his 2 guns?
Pretty much. He'd be driving around with them and out in Texas on the plains or, through farmland, whatever. Sometimes he would just stop and like draw one of his pistols out of the glove box and like stare into the field like he's looking for attackers or something. And then once he's settled, he'll put it back and like start driving again. His friend's like, Bob, what are you doing?
Good Lord.
Which his friends call him Bob. A lot of these stories are collected in the Dark Horse books, the Dark Horse comic books, rather. In a lot of the issues, there's like either a single page or like a 3-page kind of short called The Adventures of Two Gun Bob. And it's like short stories like that, which they're kind of a neat, like, retrospective on the person.
I'd read that book.
Yeah. He got to a point where he's like, well, I want to be, a big guy. And he would work out and he would start boxing. He tried writing boxing stories. He tried writing like spy stories. He wouldn't call it writing. He would call it spinning a yarn. And like those wouldn't always sell very well. and he started doing like this fantasy fiction, and he's essentially credited as being the father of sword and sorcery.
Mm.
So like, let's say George R. R. Martin might not have a career right now if it wasn't for Robert Howard.
If not for Robert Howard.
Yep.
Do you think things like D&D would exist if not for like that kind of source material?
I don't have. It's what's kind of weird. I put so much time into reading Conan stuff. I didn't read many other things, so I don't know where Tolkien's timeline falls.
Oh, right.
You know,
yeah.
like what he was writing and when. Like I just don't have that knowledge in my head of like when his publishings were, because Conan didn't have much to do with like the same fantasy element of like elves and orcs.
Right.
Like I don't think there were ever an elf in a Conan story, but there was like orc-like creatures, not so much goblins. It was usually some kind of animal, demon, god, or savage tribe, I guess.
Of course.
Yeah. Also civilization. He had a big problem with like the civilized people because they were never honest.
Yeah.
Which is why he didn't mind being a thief and stealing from him.
Mm.
Him, I'm talking about Conan like it's a real person.
Hey man, to some people.
And one of the things I brought up, I wanted to try and share, because I don't think I've mentioned it before. So like in the Conan's world, he had elder gods. So like Conan always had Crom, but then there was other gods that kind of like would exist in his world, but then there was like older ones and they're more powerful. So you would hear characters in different stories refer to Crom. Set, Ymir, Mitra was a big one, Ishtar was one, and then it gets to other ones like Yog and Yag-Kosha with a hyphen. And when it gets to stuff like that, some things kind of start to make sense. Zoltli was one where it starts with an X, and so Robert Howard was pen pals with H.P. Lovecraft.
I was literally just thinking, what is that guy's name?
Yeah.
Because a lot of that sounded like... There's a Hearthstone expansion, Whispers of the Old Gods. I don't know if you ever saw that. And like there was one of the cards was Yog Saran. And he was like one of the big ones.
Yeah.
And a lot of those names like made me think back to it, and also like the Lovecraft type stuff.
Yep.
So it's pen pals with him.
Oh, yeah.
Like just by happenstance.
They were both writers.
Right.
And they would like kind of read each other's stuff sometimes, and then they would talk about writing, and they would just talk about...
Why didn't they like just call each other, send an email?
In 1930s?
I'm a funny guy.
That was a good one. They never like visited. They came close though, because I don't think Howard traveled much, but Lovecraft did. So Lovecraft like came close. Like I think he made it to Louisiana or something, but they never met in person. And there is like a book of their published letters too, of what they've written to each other. I don't have that yet, but
That's surprising.
Yeah,
Shocking.
you know,
Some fan.
and at the time, having not known who Lovecraft was when I was into the Conan stuff, I was oh, who's this guy? Let me pick up some of his stuff. Never heard of him before.
Oh, God.
And now he was like one of the most popular, like, you know, among specific groups of fans. He's huge. Like, who on the internet doesn't know who Cthulhu is by now, right?
Yeah. I mean,
You know?
there's like kid-friendly card games about Cthulhu.
Yeah.
So
My First Mythos. Baby's First Mythos.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I read a couple like Lovecraft stuff, trying to look in to see if there was traded influences between them.
Right.
But I just couldn't get into it as much at the time. You know? And like I was having to do actual college things by then.
Yeah.
I just didn't have the time anymore. But
especially when you're into a certain type, like it can be tough even if they might be similar. Like like I said, I'm a big fan of Chuck Palahniuk. I tried to read some Vonnegut, which a lot of people said, oh, if you like Chuck Palahniuk, you should read Kurt Vonnegut. I don't really like Kurt Vonnegut. I prefer Chuck Palahniuk. And even, you know, Stephen King, he I don't know how similar they are, but like he did a book with his son recently, Owen King, called Sleeping Beauties, and I got like 70 pages in, and I was like, okay, and it just kind of stopped. You know, but part of me is also like, if it just said Stephen King on it, would I read the whole thing?
Would you have known?
You know, like, am I that big of a piece of shit?
Well, even when I was getting into the tour books, like I could tell because you could trace it back now. My urge to collect and be a collector, even back then, was showing because I needed all of them. And even though I could rate like which authors I liked best, because as far as the Ace publications go, they would print pure Howard or whatever Howard didn't finish. Sprague de Camp would finish for him, and then Lynn Carter had a part in finishing Howard transcripts and stories. And then when we got to Tor, like there was no more Howard involved, and it was just like they bought the license or the rights, and other people would write it. And that's where I found Robert Jordan,
right,
who went on to make the Wheel of Time series.
Yeah, arguably one of the. I haven't read it. My brother's a big fan of it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I don't know that.
Right? My brother's a big fan of fantasy. Like he chews through that stuff.
I wouldn't have guessed.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I had no idea where that came from, but I believe he's read all of the Wheel of Time.
Mm-hmm.
He's read all of Song of Ice and Fire, with Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
To the uninitiated. He flies through that. He loves fantasy.
And Babs, who's been on a few times, Babs who takes pictures, she reads a lot of Wheel of Time. Or if not reads,
there's
like,
a lot to read.
She does a lot of driving, so she listens to a lot of it.
Right.
On
audiobook.
Is it audiobook? Whatever ones they have. Yeah, so I had no idea Wheel of Time was a thing. Even though by the time I was done with Conan, it was at least up to book 3 or 4.
Right.
For Wheel of Time.
Which is, like 5,000 pages.
Yeah, about. Yeah.
That's why I can't get into it, because, like, I get why people say, I've tried to get people into Invincible. You should read Invincible.
Right.
Oh, there's so much. It's like, yeah, but all of it is great. just read. Like, you should be excited about how much there is. I look at Wheel of Time as an outsider. I'm like, oh my God, there's so much.
Yeah.
There's no way I'd be able to, like, actually make it through.
What got weird for me, I made it to book 9 of Wheel of Time, maybe. And at that point, like 9 was the newest issue. And I was like, okay, he's going to start wrapping it up soon. Like, he's going to start winding down, wrapping up. And like in 9, he's introducing like new antagonists. And I'm like, what? Who are these people?
Yep.
But yeah, so Robert Jordan is probably one of my favorites from the Tor publicated, run. I think Leonard Carpenter was my second favorite. And then
and these are all behind
way behind
Robert Howard.
Oh yeah.
In terms of like your favorite. Like,
oh yeah.
He's number 1.
Yeah.
Everyone else is
Well, because like at some point it's not like pure anymore. Which is kind of weird. We don't feel the same way about comics, do we?
How so?
Well, like Stan Lee is writing Spider-Man.
Right.
It's not that we turn to who was doing Superior Spider-Man?
Slott.
Dan Slott. It's not like we look at Dan Slott's work and go, oh, he's just knockoff Spider-Man.
Right.
It's like, no, he's just still writing Spider-Man. The character's continuing and he's doing a good job with it. I don't know, I didn't feel the same way. Huh. Got me thinking there now.
I mean, it's especially when it's like your favorite. I'm trying to think of a good example of like when I've experienced that. Like, I think of things that I really enjoy, like if someone else tried to write Chew, because like Spider-Man's one thing. Like, how many people have written Spider-Man? 100.
Yeah.
It's insane. Whereas Conan is like we mentioned, it's that it's like an original property almost for a while there. But now Conan has almost kind of hit that. Who hasn't? There's been a bunch of people, and I'm thinking in a comic book sense.
Yeah.
But like if someone else tried to write Chew.
Oh, I couldn't even name one of the Dark Horse writers of Conan.
Yeah, it's. Yep.
I mean, it's unfortunate to them. I mean, they still made good stories, but what I'd be reading in Dark Horse is stuff that I've already read in novel form.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they would just take an interpretation and draw pictures to it, which is fine, And sometimes they would change a thing here or there to make it different or to make it new and interesting, or I would forget something that they'd put in. But there's a lot of material to go off of. And like a good way to re-deliver classics, because some of Howard's finest stuff, like most popular, was Red Nails and Hour of the Dragon and Phoenix on the Sword. I mean, these all like take place at different parts of Conan's life, and so it's not like Howard ever had like a solid timeline. One of the things he would say as he's typing, as he's writing, it feels like Conan's behind him, like telling him the story. And so it's like, this is what he happens to be telling him, at this time. It's like, well, here's when I was a king and they tried to take my throne away from me. And, I was attacked at night in my bedchamber and I fought him off with this magical sword. And so that's what he's going to write, which as he's writing for a pulp magazine, he's not writing a 300-page book.
Right.
He's just got to fill his 60, 70, 80 pages or
he
whatever.
can do whatever he wants.
Yeah. So, I mean, I imagine if he had the ability to know, like, you could put together 600 pages. Like, I don't know what kind of story he'd come up with at that point, because he never had to do that. Which is like it's a grace that writers get now if they've earned it, they've made it up there. But yeah, I don't know if he ever had like a solid timeline laid out compared to just like, well, he's a king now.
Yeah.
And then we go back and here's when he's, just getting started as a barbarian warrior out of Cimmeria again.
That feels so refreshing.
And now I'm going to write him as a pirate.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's going to have a girlfriend named Belit.
And you just read it and you dig it. You don't flip it open and you go, oh, well, how did he get here? But last time he was a king.
Who puts the air that tires the Batmobile? Who does?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, no, he adventured, and this is what he's doing now.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter how he got there. Like, I mean, maybe that is part of the story, but it's just he's on this ship, and I'm going to read about him being on the ship.
Yep.
He's a pirate.
Pretty much. Yeah. So, one of the things I surprised you with, because I'm going a lot of back and forth between Conan and Robert Howard, was I showed you I got my VHS tapes.
Your VHS collection.
That I've kept, that I haven't gotten rid of.
Which are I gotta say, they are in immaculate condition.
Yeah. Well, I've been very protective of them. But I showed you, I didn't show you the movie because I didn't make you watch it because we don't have VHS players anymore. But I showed you the cassette tape of a movie called The Whole Wide World. And it stars Vincent D'Onofrio and who's it, Rebecca?
No, it's Renee.
Renee Zellweger. And I was like, yo, they made a movie about Howard. And you're like, no, they didn't. I was like, they did. Here, look. And you're like, why does this exist?
Yeah, it's kind of surreal. Because if not for you, I would never know who Robert Howard was. Mm-hmm. Which is what a lot of people would probably see it as a shame. But I think the casual person probably would not be aware of Robert Howard's existence. And then to find out that there was a major motion picture made about his life starring a white-hot Vincent D'Onofrio and Renee Zellweger, it was...
I think that was right before her role in Chicago, too.
Chicago was like early 2000s, yeah?
Yeah. Oh, this was 97. So
yeah.
Yeah, this was 97. This was before her diaries. Bridget Jones?
Bridget Jones.
Yeah.
Before her diaries.
I can't think of them. But she plays Neveline Price, who was like the one love interest that Howard had. Mm-hmm. And even that, like, again, it was kind of weird because he couldn't always pull himself away from his mom.
Right.
They almost made it. It was really close, but she had to move or something like that. And the movie really got to me because there's a point where she finds out he's died. He's committed suicide. Mm. And like, she's really, it's really getting to her. And just like some wise old lady in the bus is like, well, don't you feel better for having known him? And I'm at home, like absolutely like tearing up at everything. Oh, at least you knew who he was. But like Conan never appeared in the movie.
Right.
They just had like a really cool, like kind of like not quite a flashback, but D'Onofrio's character is talking about like, well, Conan's the damnedest bastard there ever was. And he's got this Texas accent and like they're putting this image of flames behind him and you could hear swords clashing and everything.
Very 90s.
He gets so into the character.
Especially if it's one that he created.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And this is well before He-Man and what other, muscle guys are there? This is back in the back in the 30s.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Let's see. We were talking in like, I think, what was it? Because you had mentioned the movies at some point.
Mm-hmm. I have not seen them, which I want to watch Conan. We need to find a VHS player.
Well, I have the DVD too.
But I want to watch it on VHS with you. I feel like it's more pure. Like I get to experience.
It's really not. We'd have to watch it on like TBS network TV where they just edit out any nude scenes.
It's not like records. It's not enjoyable. It's just watch it on the DVD.
It'll be fine. Oh, I tried showing a friend like recently, like 2 years ago. Didn't work out.
Wasn't digging.
Because all she would do would like make fun of how 80s it was.
Well, I mean, it was made in the 80s.
It was made in the 80s. It's like, it's not funny. Just can you just watch the movie?
Yeah.
He's like, oh my God, look at his hair. It's so 80s hair. I'm like, yeah, but all right, fine. We're watching something else.
Yeah. Your hair right now is very 2010s hair.
I couldn't deal with her thrashing it. So we just had to stop.
It's messed up.
I
wanted to do that a couple months ago when you had was it John's party, I think, when you put on Dick Tracy?
Oh yeah.
I had like because I'd never seen Dick Tracy.
Yeah. And I was like, friends, like John's already a fan of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And going in, I was like, oh my God, this movie's so dated. This movie's stupid. Like this is, and like an hour in, I was like, what's Dick gonna do next? The guy is a flathead. You know.
How's he gonna get out of this one?
I really
he's handcuffed to exploding steam pipes.
Like, and I was really enjoying it. And like sadly, I had to leave before it even ended because I had to go take care. I can't remember what I had to do. I had to leave, but and I was like, I was really enjoying Dick Tracy, which was shocking to me. I thought I was going to sit there and I was going to riff track it or MST3K it, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But like I was kind of like, everyone, shut up! I'm watching Dick Tracy.
There's good elements to to capture and follow. Just like Dick Tracy, they're in Conan. You just gotta. That's one of the things for me, like for like adolescent Alex. It was like a lot of it spoke to me. I don't know if it spoke to me too much. Probably, it's why I'm the weirder I am today. But
I feel like there are worse things that could have talked to you.
One of the jokes I had made, I was like, yeah, the movie version with Jason Momoa, Aquaman. And you were like, isn't that the only one?
I was like, yeah, that's Conan.
I was like, that was the worst.
An
Conan.
abomination.
That was the worst Conan. The Momoa Conan was... So Conan the Destroyer, which was the second movie with Schwarzenegger, wasn't as good as the first one. Because, like, studio got their hands on it.
Yeah. We made money on the first one. Schwarzenegger's getting huge.
Let's put in Grace Jones and some other people, I guess. Oh, Wilt Chamberlain. Let's put him in the movie. Yeah.
Fresh off that airplane success.
And one of the things I went to, and I was like, hang on. I was like, Joe, you seen Gladiator? And you were like, yeah, I've seen Gladiator. And I was like, remember that part where Russell Crowe's like, one of his friends is this huge dude, this giant, like 7 foot tall guy.
Yeah.
And you were like, that like, pretends to choke on the food because it's poisoned.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, you get it. I was like, he was Conan in a TV series. I think he got like one season. It was pretty goofy.
As most TV series are apt to be.
Because the Conan TV series with Rolf Mueller was following on the heels of the Hercules and Xena success.
Right.
And they were like, "Oh, these are good. Like, we'll do a similar thing." And they gave him like the band of friends that'll follow him around. So there's a mute staff guy, and there's a big axe dude, and like there was a girl who would do something. I guess I don't remember what.
Was Bruce Campbell somehow involved in this as well?
I don't think so.
I feel like his character, the master of
Autolycus,
yeah,
Master of Thieves.
Yeah. I feel like it would somehow fit into the canon.
I don't remember Hercules' sidekick's name, but I remember Autolycus' name.
Oh God, yeah, I can't remember it either. He's blonde.
Yeah. And smaller.
I can remember Gabrielle,
yeah.
but I cannot remember Hercules' guy friend. We don't need to.
But even if this series like wasn't great, just for what it was as a TV show, Rolf played the character well. Like he got the speech right, and it wasn't really like broken English, but it was like a barbaric, language kind of thing. And it was done right because you didn't hyphenate any words. You didn't always, because that was one of the things about the first two movies was like they didn't always do a your, it's you are.
Eolus.
Yeah.
I had to go look it up. Your.
They didn't abbreviate as much.
Mm.
Whereas in the Jason Momoa Conan, like they were frequently just talking like you and me would talk right now.
Right.
And if I'm watching, you know, a barbarian movie with guys swinging swords and shooting crossbows and maybe magic is happening, I don't want to hear that. Give me what my interpretation of fantasy history is like.
Mm-hmm. Kind of takes you out of it.
Yeah. I thought of the Jason Momoa Conan earlier in the week, and it was because there was something in it that I hated. I hated so much. There's an opening scene that's actually pretty good. Ron Perlman's his dad. So Ron Perlman's is Conan's dad.
Yeah.
And they do a thing with like the young Cimmerian boys where it's like you have to go run around the entire mountain with this robin egg in your mouth and not break. You have to come back without the egg being broken. And so like this, you know, this pack of like 5, 6, 8 kids or whatever have to go start running and like they'll knock each other down to try and break their egg or whatever, like punch someone else in the mouth. But on this run, like the Pictish nation, which is next door to Cimmeria, like will invade. And so the Picts are coming for him, P-I-C-T.
Right.
And so like some of the kids like flee and just run back without completing their path around the mountain. And like young Conan, who's like 10 or 12, ends up killing all the Picts.
Jesus.
And he comes back like, you know, way after the rest of the kids, like with their severed heads, and spits out a broken egg into his father's hand.
What the fuck?
Okay, but the thing I hated was that to try and portray the Picts as savages and unhuman or something, or like they're really, really native, like to a severe animalistic degree.
Right.
When they would attack, they gave them animal sounds. So like literally the jaguar roar.
Right, yeah, that you hear everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I hate that so much.
Coming out of a human.
Yup.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing. Like, I'll take the Wilhelm scream. I'll take the creaky gate. You always hear the same creaky gate.
Yep. Yep.
Quarantine 2. Quarantine 1 wasn't a bad movie. Quarantine 2 was terrible. Excuse me. Because their zombies had to all have animal sounds, and their zombies now apparently make the jaguar sound. And then in the Powers TV show on PlayStation Network, remember that?
Yeah.
In season 2, one of the FBI chicks, spoiler alert, has powers, and she's a cat girl. And she makes the jaguar sound when she attacks, too. And just find a better sound for a person to make.
Yeah.
Just do a little bit of work. Just hire a decent Foley artist or a sound engineer or something, and do something original. Don't do the exact same box sound that we've had for years. It's terrible. It doesn't make sense. It just takes you out of it. I hate it so much. I hate it. I wonder what like Jared and Bob would have to say about something like that.
Yeah.
You know,
Call him.
right now. What do you think of the Jaguar Wilhelm? You know what I mean?
You hear it everywhere.
It's the worst. But they put that in that movie, and like that's how like immediately I went into the movie knowing I wouldn't be that big of a fan of it, and that really solidified it. Also, Rose McGowan, you gave her like a half-shaved head. She has nice hair. Like,
yeah.
No, let's just mess up her head so she looks hideous and ugly.
Just fuck her up.
That didn't work out.
But hey, Jason Momoa went on to do Aquaman.
He went on to be a thrall.
Who?
What is he? A Drago.
Drago. Yeah, Khal Drago. Yeah.
Yeah. So a call is
He's like the king of the horsemen.
So that means king essentially, right? Because
Kind of,
there's other
yeah.
calls.
There's a
isn't
bunch
there?
of calls.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
like the
that's what
leader of that group.
Whatever.
And like he could be dethroned at any time by someone who like I want to kill you. I want the group now. If I recall, I haven't read Game of Thrones, the first one in ages, because Game of Thrones is the first one in a song about for the uninitiated. The whole books are not Game of Thrones.
But so I've read more of the novels.
Yeah.
I haven't read many of the Marvel comic series, which some people are really surprised at. There's also when Marvel was putting out in the magazine Savage Sword of Conan, which wasn't like comic sized; it's magazine size. You can see those. But they would be more, I guess, anthologies. You could call them, because each issue of Savage Sword could be different, whereas in the regular comics, like usually issue to issue, they're following the same story, the same path. Somehow, at some point,
you kind of expect comic books to be serialized.
Yeah. But we have a lot of Roy Thomas to thank for that going so long, because he was writing, and that was also a huge bump to Barry Windsor Smith in his career. A lot of people associate Barry Windsor Smith to Conan, and vice versa, as far as the comic books go.
Right.
But like my Conan comic book knowledge isn't that deep, not as much as like the novels were, and like reading about Robert Howard and whatnot.
Do you see the novels as, like are the comic books considered like canon, if there is such a thing? Like, you know, do the books and the comics go together, or do you see them as two separate like universes?
Oh, I see them as two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Like the proper universe is the novels, like the Howard set, the Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter set, and those, like the Ace published ones, I see as like the primaries. The Tor books are just kind of like add-ons that may or may not exist. I don't really care. Some of them are pretty well done when they get the locations correct. But some of the ones like really go off the rails, which is why like my Steve Perry issues, copies, and Roland Green, those authors, wasn't a big fan of those ones. Right. It was like my least favorite ones. Least favorite, like not even in a positive. I remember reading some of the Steve Perry Conan books and being like, "This is bad. I
Conan.
Don't like this at all."
Bonin. When you read Conan, when you first started like getting into it, had you seen?
Do
the
I
movie?
hear Arnold's voice? Is that
no? Like sort of in a way. That's
okay.
That's kind of my question. Like, was there a picture of like when you picture Conan? Because when I read books, I'm picturing the thing in my head. You know, I don't know if that's the way everyone else does it, but and when I think about Conan, excuse me, I either picture that's great. I got a really good thing going on here.
You'll be okay.
I picture either Schwarzenegger, or the typical what you'd see on like the cover of a comic. You know, to someone who maybe like when you just start out with the books, like did you have an image of Conan in your head, or is it just
some of the books took some pretty wild interpretations?
Right.
Because some of the paintings that were done, if the artist got it right, they would be like, oh, well, this story takes place at a younger era. So I'm going to draw Conan maybe smaller, with shorter hair. And maybe like, how tan he is might play. I know it's a weird thing to point out, but like, if he's in a city, he's going to be clothed more than if he's just in the wilderness or on the desert forever.
I only picture Conan in loincloth.
Yeah, pretty much.
It.
Yeah.
He is allergic to shirts. They do not.
But usually, like, the images that show up in the books and then what gets described in the descriptions is what has stuck out to me.
Right.
So like he's not like a light brown hair. He has black hair. It's black.
Right.
And his eyes are blue. And there's always like descriptions in somewhere, each one like it's ice blue or icy gaze or a gray blue or something like that. And then like also riddled with scars. There's scars all over the place. And then each book has to have some kind of thing of how strong he is, because he has some amazing feat of strength, or how good he is at sword fighting, and
or glow sticks.
But I would like to see, even if not a whole movie, then like a short, or because you could do an entire movie on just red nails. Which is less than 150 pages.
Is that one of the more popular like Conan storylines?
Yeah. That's one where he's like adventuring through a desert and happens to find like a citadel, but it's in the middle of nowhere, and who can possibly live here? And he goes in to like maybe he'll find something to loot, or maybe some supplies or whatever. And it ends up being much bigger than he thought it was. And there's like two families on opposite sides of the citadel, and they've become two different civilizations, and they're constantly at war with each other, and they've been doing this so long they're like allergic to light, so they don't go out into the sun, they don't leave the citadel, and there's like only a couple like paths where they could get to each other, and when they successfully kill someone else, they come back and shout 3 more red nails. And like that represents like we got through, you know, they put them on this giant wall.
Right.
Yeah. And it's representative of that. And like that was a fun story.
I'm intrigued at you said it's a quick one.
Yeah.
Because now I kind of want to check it out. What about the current state of Conan? Like aside from Marvel, like have there been really any books lately?
Not that I know of. I mean, I haven't been keeping track or watching.
Right. Aside from like comics, there's always
he's had a couple of video games.
Has he?
Yeah. Remember Exiles? Was that PAX?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yep.
So it wasn't exactly Conan game, but it was like Hyborian Exiles.
Right.
Where it took place in the area. Like Conan might be a character in the game, but like you're making a character that exists in that place.
Yeah.
But I wasn't really a fan of like the server concept, where it's like, oh, you can choose what server you to play on. I don't know. And before that, they were
explaining that to Robert Howard.
And before that, they had an MMO, which like if you look up like reviews of it, a review will say like, oh, this is a dead MMO. But if you talk to the developers, they're like, no, it's still running. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
Where like you get to play as Conan, like a character in that world.
It's kind of like the Star Wars.
Yeah.
Where you get to play like not necessarily as Darth Vader, but you can play as like a.
Mm-hmm. Which that seems interesting, but it's more popular like in Europe, I believe, than it is over here, because that's where the developer is.
Yeah.
But Dark Horse has been doing a similar thing, where they haven't kept one long running series. I think the furthest they've got may have been 50 issues, and then they would do like a reboot, essentially, or not a reboot. They do like a different storyline. So they did Conan, and then they would do Conan the Barbarian, and then Conan the Usurper. And one of the things I pointed out to you earlier was like it's the West Coast Avengers confusion, where it's like, is it Avengers West Coast or West Coast Avengers? Because Marvel had King Conan, but also Conan the King.
Conan the King.
And if you look it up, it's just considered both. There's just a slash there. It's either or.
Now, what would you like going forward with Marvel? You know, getting the rights back and all that.
Oh, right, yeah.
Like, what would you do? Would you rather a one long ass storyline, like another 100 or 275 issues? Would you prefer like they did 25, 30 issues of this, and now we're gonna restart it? Here's a new Conan storyline.
They're probably gonna do a bunch of restarts anyway, because Marvel.
Because that's the state of comics these days.
Yeah, they don't really. That company doesn't like to stick to long running things. I mean, they might. Oh my god, they might. A thing that's cool with Marvel recently is their legacy issues.
Yep.
Where it's like we've done 600 Fantastic Four, but then we did 20 issues of FF, and then we did 20 issues of something else. So now we're at 640 if we add them all together, which means our new issue numbering is this.
They did that with Thor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. I hope they don't try that. I hope they don't do that.
Like issue 1 of Conan is actually issue like 276.
They had a few miniseries here and there, so it'll be in their 300s.
Right.
One of the things about the Conan books, the novels, and then also what Dark Horse was doing, what they caught on to, was that sometimes it's a cop-out, but the idea of like, well, our elder king is going to tell us the stories of his history and his past. And so sometimes it's Conan's like, on the throne or like hanging out, drinking wine and whatever, and talking about his time when he was fighting the priests of Set and Stygia and whatnot. When he was 25 or when he was 30.
It kind of spoils the ending.
Oh, he lives?
He's going to be okay. Eventually.
But with that, you get attached to the characters around him, too.
Yeah.
So it's like, well,
is Billet gonna survive, or which is his pirate girlfriend and whatnot?
Of course.
And the girl who he meets and like saves from slavery, but then later on becomes his queen.
What?
Yeah, forgot her name. Starts with a Z.
Aeolus.
I like the concept where you could jump around and visit different eras and different timelines.
Yeah.
Even if it's not doing like the recounting story kind of thing. Because even then, like, it might be a flashback just to lead to like, well, Thothamon is still after him and hasn't died yet. And it's like still coming after him now that he's on his throne kind of stuff. That's always fun to look at. But I would prefer one that would kind of bounce. Because I don't know if I need to read. Do we need to see another Batman origin? You know? Do the Waynes have to get shot again?
Yeah. Do we need to see the pearls?
And so, the pearls, yeah. And so, like, yeah, we know he's born, like, on a battlefield in Cimmeria, and then maybe he pushes the Wheel of Pain, and then he starts pit fighting, and then he escapes, and then he starts...
What's the Wheel of Pain?
In the Conan the Barbarian movie,
Mm-hmm.
when... I forgot James Earl Jones' name. I don't think it was Thothamon. He had a different name. He wipes out his village, and like only Conan and some other kids are alive.
Right.
And he sells them as a slave, and they end up like pushing this wheel, which like grinds grain or something like that. They're a human water wheel essentially, and that's his job.
Thulsa?
Thulsa Doom. Thulsa Doom. God
Yep.
damn it! Should have known that one. And so like in the movie, he essentially pushes this wheel for 10 plus years.
Jesus Christ.
Because from like as a 8-10-year-old child until he's like, you know, late teenager, and then he gets set free. Oh no, then he gets bought as a pit fighter,
Right.
as a gladiator.
Of course.
Yeah.
The natural progression.
And that's when he goes to the Hyrcanians. And the Hyrcanians are the ones who ride their horse in the steppe with a falcon at their breast.
Say that again?
All right. That's my lead up to the famous line. So Conan's like hanging out with these Asian looking guys. They're the Hyrcanians. They're essentially Chinese or so, like the Mongolians.
Mm-hmm.
And the one like chief of the tribe goes, "What is best in life?" And so one of the Mongolianish, you know, whatever dudes is like a swift horse at your call and a falcon at your breast and the wind in your hair. And the chief is like, "False! Conan, what is best in life?" And that's when it does crush your enemies and kill your, see them driven before you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does he? Yeah.
Yeah, so the crush your enemies, see them driven before you was like, is the correct answer.
Crush your enemies
And see them driven before
and
you.
see them what?
Driven.
Driven.
before
Okay.
you.
Yep,
Sorry.
yep.
I'm mumbling a lot today. With the coughs. And we could skip the third one. But the guy who's like, you know, a horse on the steppe and the wind at your breast and the falcon at your call. That's the false answer that the guy gives, who thinks that's what's best in life.
I feel like that is, though.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a nice thing to have. You just riding your horse across the plains.
Yeah, and
with
you got
your-
a falcon.
Yeah. The wind's in your hair. It's not too bad.
I don't really need to crush anyone.
Why did I get to that point?
I
Oh,
don't know.
so that's and from there, like Conan gets set free, and it doesn't have to pit fight anymore. And so he like escapes and becomes a thief.
And eventually a barbarian.
Well, he's been a barbarian the entire time.
When does one earn the title of
You're
barbarian?
kind of born with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someday.
But yeah, Wheel of Pain in the movie, that's what that is.
Right.
In the books, he doesn't waste time pushing a wheel for 10 years. He wouldn't. That version, he'd be way too pissed off to
Yeah.
to be a slave for that long.
Yep. He would have crushed his enemy.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yep. But it looked like they're gonna do a couple different things where they have their Conan story, but then they're gonna maybe do some kind of crossovers. And it's like, you know, Conan doesn't need to hang out with Thor,
Yeah.
you know, and fight Frost. You know, I kind of want to watch Conan fight Frost Giants now.
Yeah. Maybe like a Conan version.
Yeah. But like, he doesn't need to hang out with Wolverine. What's he gonna do with
I don't
Wolverine?
need that.
I'm okay.
I don't need
Pass.
that.
He doesn't need to be an Avenger, an honorary Avenger, I guess. That's not necessary. Please don't.
Yeah, I'm good.
I'm saying this even though I recently got one of my favorite issues of Wonder Woman Conan crossover, which they put Wonder Woman in Conan's world, and they encounter each other as children.
Mm.
And so it's like they have some history where something magic happened, and she met a man.
What?
Right? Those don't exist, Amazon. And so like they're having this adventure together for a while. And like it's working because it's still like in Conan's world. It's not, in current day or anything. There's not like weird time travel going on, it seems.
Mm.
But
Comics.
which now he's been in 3 different publishers.
It's pretty admirable. I mean, it says a lot about the character.
Putting a Marvel character in a DC book.
Yeah.
It's neat. I'll take it.
Yep.
I mean, it's happened before, but it's not. I don't know if it's as a widely known character. Or like
I mean,
as an old character.
When you think about it, going that far back, I mean, is Conan older than Superman?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that says something,
I have to check.
like to have like an original character like Conan the Barbarian, who may not have like the cult following, and or not I think he does have the cult following. May not have like the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the broad fan base that like everyone knows who Superman is. Go up to a kid, hey man, what's Clark Kent's alter ego, Superman? Most kids would probably know that.
Conan the Barbarian was created by Robert Howard. First published in Weird Tales in 1932.
How much does that run for?
Oh, I don't have that up.
That's very close to Superman.
Was created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster in 1933.
1 year.
And they sold it to DC in 1938. So he wasn't published until 38. I believe. I could be wrong. That's what Wikipedia is telling me.
Well, I mean, Wikipedia is always right.
So Robert Howard's been dead for 2 years before Superman was printed.
But I mean, it's admirable that a character like that.
Which imagine a
managed
character
to-
who started off his first published stories probably have less than 500 pages.
Mm.
And we've gotten this far with that. And like they've tried to bring some of Howard's other characters to the forefront, which like Red Sonja was never supposed to be what she is now.
Mm.
She was supposed to exist in like in feudal France. Yeah. Not like the same kind of like sword and sorcery fantasy
Right.
scale mail armor wearing redhead we have now. It's like no, not quite that. Okay, we'll just go with it. Sure.
Wherever works.
And King Cole was one of the ones that like they've tried to push. If you can't buy the rights to Conan, we'll just try and get Cole instead.
Right.
So like that's
He's a
happened few
giant
times.
muscle guy. Muscle guys are muscle guys.
And he's a king of stuff too, I guess. One of the things that was almost trouble was that the Pict, P-I-C-T,
Mhm.
those are real people. They existed in
Right.
they were somewhere in the UK before it was the UK.
Mm.
I believe it was around the Irish. I have to look that up now. I don't want to get that wrong and make people angry.
Checking.
And then I spelled that wrong.
Oh my word.
Oh, Northern Scotland. Late Iron Age and early medieval periods. Ethno-linguistically Celtic. In the fictional books, they're portrayed as like vicious savages,
Right.
like just disgusting, practically Neanderthal-esque people. And there was a quick story which I read on like a forum board or message board somewhere where someone was referencing like Hyborian Age Conan stuff, and they're like, "Wow, those disgusting pics," and someone who's like actually Scottish is like, "What the?
Yikes.
You shut your mouth!" And they're like, "What?" And they're like, "Those are real." And like there was a lot of apologizing happening.
Right.
But there's a lot of of issues recently coming up with H.P. Lovecraft, because the 1920s, 1930s were not a very enlightened time for people. And there's a lot of like misunderstanding and racism, or if you look at like how people portrayed Asians in like the Yellow Devil or something like that, and you know, it was just really, no one had a solid understanding of who these people were, and that they were just regular normal people, but they had to create this false identity for a lot of things. And so writers at the time would just follow along that, you know, that false narrative that they've heard and learned, which like some people think like Howard didn't have like the fondest respect for Native Americans, just because like, well, you know, you had to fight to claim Texas and stuff like that,
right?
So I don't want to get too far into that. I have to like read more about it and make sure I get it correct, because I might not be 100% on that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like, oh, I heard of these picks. I'll just put them in my book and like make them into this. If you look at his map of Hyboria, like some places are obviously made up and some are like, oh, it's Iranistan.
Of course. I mean, at the end of the day, it's probably tough to come up with everything original.
Eventually, yeah. Yeah, right?
Just add in a stand.
One of the things I learned, if you've taken a writing class and like your teacher, professor, whoever, pulls the line of like, well, write what you know. It's like, you grew up in the Depression. What are you going to write about?
Yeah.
How everything sucks? Like, you're in the middle of the Depression. Make your fantasy world and have fun with it, which is what he essentially did. You know, like his family was fairly like, they weren't like rich, but they were well off because his dad was a doctor.
Yeah. And
so his dad being a doctor he was able to provide, and he didn't want for too much, but he just had to earn his own living. Which, like, write what you know. Oh, yeah, the Dust Bowl's happening. People are starving to death. Like,
everything is terrible.
Yeah, exactly. So he came up with, you know, this incredible person who couldn't be stopped. I mean, he still did research. If you looked at it, there's still elements that, like, you know, can play off of Hercules and Greek myths and whatever. But I think that's all I got.
Yeah. That's pretty much perfect timing.
Yeah.
That was very informative, and I'm glad that this happened. And now I'm going to go look through your Conan stuff some more.
I remember way back, we had Colin on for some episode. We were talking about books and writers, and I brought up Howard. And I brought up, like, his 1906, 1936, and Colin was, like, shocked.
Yeah.
It's like, what's this? Like, never saw that side of me before.
Oh, like your knowledge?
Yeah.
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 Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's
I'm just some comic book geek.
Exactly. Yeah, that's all you are. I'm just gonna pinhole you in that one thing.
No, that's false to assume that. Like, Colin, he respects me.
Well,
I don't want to say like that's all he thinks of me.
No, it's always shocking when like, because like I like to think we all know a little bit about a lot of shit.
Yeah, yeah.
So when one of us drops knowledge that might be outside of that little bit, Chuck
like,
Conlick was born. I couldn't tell you.
Your wife cooks tea sets. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Just like random stuff. Like,
yeah.
I can't even think of it right now. I don't have an example, so we're gonna leave with that. But that was really fun to learn about Conan. I want to watch the movie with you sometime, maybe both of them, depending on how 80s they are. Excuse me. And yeah, I can't think of a good outro. So I guess until next week, I've been JR.
I'm Alex.
This is a very unfulfilling exit. I'm not feeling it. And this has been episode. I gotta go up in my notes. Episode 305 of Opinions May. I'm sorry. I want to apologize for the ending of Opinions May Vary.
Remember to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and that's enough.
Yeah, you don't need to do anymore.
No. Yeah.
Maybe combine it with having a horse and a falcon or whatever.
Yeah. Wind in your hair.
Yeah. That sounds like a good time to me.
Mm-hmm.
Of Opinions May Vary.